So, once you get through your project and you get the funding, then you start looking at equipment. And once you start looking at equipment, you'll notice there are options, so many options for everything. And so, the first thing to look at is what materials are you scanning or digitizing? Do you only have newspaper articles, or do you have a combination of audio, visual, photos, paper? And so once you get that material list down, you can start looking at the options. Expensive does not always equal good. And what I mean by that is when you start looking for scanners, you'll see ones that are thousands of dollars, but they do not offer anything that you can't get for cheaper. So you've now decided that you want scanners or other implements to help digitize your resources. Look for used first. And the reason is because like you, other organizations have digitized their materials and then they don't need that equipment anymore. And so to help bring back some funds, they are looking to possibly either rent out that equipment or to sell it. Buy what you need, not what you want. And what I mean by that is it can look great, but do you need it? If you have one project with 4 VHS tapes, do you need to spend the money on 2 VCRs? Um, and then getting down to hardware. So for hardware, my personal recommendations is for a feed scanner. A great option is the Epson ES400. It runs about $250, but I have used mine for 5 years now, and I've never had an issue with it. For if you only have photos and no slides, the LIDE by Canon, the 300 or 400 is a great option. They run from $70 to $90, and they may not look great and they might not be, robust, but they do everything you need them to do. If you have photos and slides and you need something a little bigger than the LIDE, the Epson V600, it's $230, but it does slides, it does photo negatives, it does photos, it also does papers. So it encompasses all that you may need from a flatbed without needing multiple. And then my favorite for maps or delicate items is the CZUR ET16. It stands up, so it's more of a downward facing scanner. And it's great for very delicate documents that you don't want on a flatbed that could be, pressed between the top and the glass. So those are good hardware as a basic. Software, most come with a built-in software that is free with the purchase of the scanner, and they are the best for what you need. There will be a lot of companies saying, oh, you need our additional software, but you don't. Adobe is needed if you want to combine paper documents into packets, depending on what your needs are. And for films, I actually suggest OBS, which is a software used by game streamers. And the reason is it's free and it has a lot of options to help you take a media and change it to what you need. And then one thing to think about with equipment is your project. So as Rachel said earlier, look at your project and decide what you're going to scan and what your priorities are. So if you pick a project that has one VHS tape or one slide or only, under 100 slides, it may not be worth buying the equipment versus contracting out to someone who already has the equipment. In the long run, it will be most cost effective for your organization. So you get your equipment and you have your project and you're ready to actually scan. And one of the questions that the software will ask is, what resolution do you want? So a couple of things to consider with this is what the intended goal of your project is. Do you just want to have these documents saved? Do you want to display them either by printing or, print one of the images and put it on a library wall? Or do you want to put it forward facing for historians and other archivists to be able to see the product? And why this is important is because it is determining what is it going to be expanded? Do you want to blow it up? And if that, then you need a higher resolution. Another thing is audience. Who's going to see this? Who do you want to see this? Do you want this to be publicly available for authors to put in their books or historians to use? And if so, the higher DPI, the better. Because then if a historian uses your image in their book, when it's printed, it's not going to look really blurry. And the last really important, probably one of the most important, is what is your available space for storage? And the reason that this is important is because as you increase the DPI, it's going to take up more space. So if you have a finite space or a large project that you do not feel you can scan everything or digitize everything to store it, then you have to look at the first two, your intended goal and your audience. And that will actually even go back to prioritizing. What is your goal? Who is your audience? And so here's an example. The original image is a 2-inch by 3-inch. And as you can see at 400 zoom, at 300, 600, and 1200, there's a big difference in what it looks like. And while that might not be important if you just have your images online for people to view, if you want someone to be able to use that, then you're going to need to increase it. So in my professional opinion, nothing should be under 600 DPI for photos. Black and white paper can be at 300. But once you start adding in color and other elements, then you need to bump it up to 600 to be able to get the longevity and the viewability that you want. So format. So you scan and then you save and it asks you what your format you want to be in. And I may sound like a broken record, but also things to consider is intended goal. What do you want to do with this? Do you want this just to be saved so people can view it inside your facility and your organization? Or do you want it to be forward facing? Audience is really important because if you want people to be able to take a photo and go print it at a Walmart or another organization, there's certain formats that you can't use for that. Available space. Some formats take up more space than others, which is good because those formats that take up more space tend to be better quality and stay around longer. Longevity. How long do you want this resource to be around? Hopefully a long time. But if you use proprietary software, the minute that that company or organization goes out of business, you might not be able to view that document anymore. And then usability. This goes back to your audience. How do you want to use it? Do you want just to store it, or do you want people to be able to access it? And so, again, in my professional experience and opinion for papers, I scan everything in TIFF and then I combine them into a PDF. So I have TIFF copies, but for storage, and then for forward facing usability, a PDF.
Hmm.
And what's nice about a PDF for newspaper articles and other documents is it's OCR, so you can search. So if you're a researcher, you can search for a certain topic or a certain individual versus going through 10,000 scans. Also, for photos, if you want long-term storage, TIFF is great. However, if you want them to be able to be printed, you also have to put them in JPEG. So in a lot of cases, you're going to have duplicate copies, one for storage and preservation and one for forward-facing accessibility. And then naming conventions. How do you name the things? Intended goal. Are you putting it on a CMS, DAMS? Or do you plan on just having a folder with documents that people have to search through? What platform are you going to put it on? Are you going to put it on a platform that can be accessed through the internet? Or is it location specific? Or is it individual specific? How the document will be assessed. Will it only be for storage, long-term storage, so you don't lose that document? Or will everyone be able to look at it at any time? And consistency. However you start your project, carry through. And what I mean by that is if you start a project that's a month long, 15 days in, don't decide to change the name. Because if you do, then whoever you have doing the final, assessing and putting it in and researching is going to be confused. So here are some examples. Collection name. So if you have a specific collection of newspaper articles that all have to do with paddle boats, you name it paddle boats, and then the X's are the number of scan. If you're doing a photo project and you have specific photographers, you can store it by photographer's name. And that also makes it easily searchable. If you are scanning a book, which we will get into that later, but if you are scanning a book, the author, book title, and then page. With some archives, you have just boxes of information. So you scan it, box, number, and then the numbers after that are auto-populated by your scanning software. And then video recording and audio recording, simply name it the name of the video or recording. That makes it easily searchable. And it makes it easy for if someone comes in 2 years later to put it into a CMS, if it wasn't already, then they can say, oh, okay, this is that photographer.